Okay, we're in the ninth shir, I believe, of Siman Kuf Chav Tes, and we are up to Sif Chav Aleph. Sif Chav Aleph and the halachos of Rosh Hashana. Let's get started. We did Chav. Okay, Sif Chav Aleph. The Kitzur says like this. This is going to be, we're talking now about Tashlich, okay? So the halacha goes like this. La'achar tfilas mincha, after you daven mincha on Rosh Hashanah, koidem shkia sachama b'yom aleph, before shkia on the first day, shal Rosh Hashanah. Now here, okay, holchan el anar, you go to a river. So here there's a few things. Number one, according to halacha, technically, even if it's after shkia, according to halacha, you could still do tashlach, right? Now, the thing is that, and that's what the Alter Rebbe says in the after shkia, which is considered night, you could still do tashlach officially, according to halacha. However, the Alter Rebbe, perhaps you could say, I've seen people say that maybe there's more reason not to, and the reason, and which is why in the Siddur the Alter Rebbe wrote Dafka Koidim Shkia Sachama on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. Part of the reason is because we say the Yud Gimel Midas Rachamim, which is the idea of Tachnun, and we don't do those things at night. Just like if you recall when we started the first time we started the halachos of Rosh Hashanah, and we spoke about slichas, we mentioned over there that you do slichas dafka after Hatzois, right? We spoke about it. I don't remember. I think we did. And the reason was because you don't want to, you can't do slichas before Hatzois, especially then it was Mitzvah Shabbos. So it was like a double reason. So here also, as soon as it's Shkia, technically it falls into that thing. So I won't say if you're running late and you're on Mitzvayim and you come, I have every year I have the same issue. I have Mitzvayim after davening on the first day, so I'm running around downtown. And then I have to go to Tashlach, where we have a whole other crew of people that we know that didn't make it to the services, or they couldn't go, so they come to hear Shofar and everything like that. So you have to get there before 9. So it's always a big rush. So I don't know that I would tell someone that comes a few minutes late not to do it. I don't know. But you should definitely schedule it out that you should be able to do it before. Because again, al pi halacha, you could still do it. Maybe some would say, could be there's more of a mashmos, according to Alter Rebbe, based on slichas and other things about Alpi the Mekubalim that he doesn't mention in the Siddur that you could do it after. He just says before Shkia, so you could say either way. One more thing about this also is, if you recall, we spoke about, trying to see where we have this written down over here. If I wrote something over here somewhere, I don't remember where. We spoke about on Shabbos, yeah? We spoke, if you remember, when we spoke about, I brought from the Rebbe, it was about, what was it about? I don't think so. There was a sikha where the Rebbe brought an example, the idea from Rosh Hashanah, about how it says it in the Siddur. It was Tashlich and, oh, maybe, was it? It's about the apples? About how you, the Seder of how you do it. Yes, correct. And over there, it said Achar Eichlin. Yes, correct. Very good. He listens. So that Sikha where the Rebbe talks about it, the Iker of the Sikha was actually about Tashlach. That was the main Sikha. And the Rebbe brought that example of the Hiratzin and how you do it in the order of the brachas by dipping the apple. He brought that as another example where there's a difference between Shulchan Aruch and the Siddur and how we pass it. So here also, when it comes to the first day of Rosh Hashanah, so the mashmos is that what happens if it's Shabbos, yeah? So technically, if you look in the Shulchan Aruch and you look in the Siddur, which is the way the Alter Rebbe writes in the Siddur, I believe he just says that you do Tashlach on the first day. I think he doesn't even mention if it's Shabbos or if it's not Shabbos. So what's mashma from there? That because the Alter Rebbe doesn't say that if it's only a weekday, you do it on the first day, it's mashma that even if it's Shabbos, you should do it. But and that's in fact, if you look in the earliest Makaides of Tashlach, which is from the Mariel, was the early, he's one of the Rishonim, I believe, and he was quoting from even before him. So I think is a Rishonim, if I'm not mistaken, maybe an early Achron. But either way, he's quoting a minig that was already a long time before him. And over there, he says you do it on the first day, even if it's Shabbos. But Payal, we don't. But Payal, what happens, and this is what the Frierdiker Rebbe used to do, is that if Shabbos fell out on the first day, he would do it the second day. Why? So the Rebbe writes about it in that Sikha, and he says, I think there's 2 reasons he says. He says, but Pashtus, what happened was that what's the problem with doing it on Shabbos? It's not mitzad, Yud Gimel Midis, and this thing and that thing. That's not an issue. You see that most people did it, and it's more of a tefillah than a tachanunim. And I forgot exactly the reasons why, but he says it's not the issue. So what's the issue? The issue is that someone might end up carrying a siddur on Shabbos. But that wasn't always the concern. People they did tashlach, even though people may carry and they weren't worried about it. So the Rebbe says it could be by the Mariel's time when they did it that way. It could be they had an Erev, or it could be they were allowed to carry there, whatever it was. But Poil, but the Rebbe says we don't. And I think he says what happened was one year. He says, if I'm not mistaken, I think I saw it there, or maybe someone else writes it, but I think he said it over there, the Rebbe says that basically the Rebbe Marash was going to Tashlich, and someone came, they knew that all the Chassidim go during the first day to Tashlich, so they came with a camera, a camera to take photos, photography or something is the way he worded it. So once he saw that, so I think he didn't even do Tashlich that day. It could be he went back, or maybe he did Tashlich and that was the last time, and then they always did it. No, that was on Shabbos. So, but what is Shabbos? Either way, you take pictures on Shabbos if it was Yom Tov also, right? So the problem was really carrying, and I think other times I think there also the Rebbe says about carrying Siddurim that people actually did carry the Siddur. Whatever the point, the point is like this: that even though al pi halacha technically you could do it on the first day even if it's Shabbos, which means if you have a little backyard tashlich and it's in your house and it's only you and your family, so no one's carrying, no one's taking pictures, technically you could do it. However, it seems like the minig is that we would push it off, even though you don't have to, but we would push it off and do it the second day instead. So when it says over here, both of those points end up being very meduyik. Number one, dafka before shkia seems to be something that we should take seriously, and also on the first day, only if it's a weekday, but not if it's going to be Shabbos, then we'll push it off. Now, where do we go? We go to the Nahar. We go to a river, ideally. Now, we don't all go to a river, right? Or a stream. But over here, they went to the river. Why did they go to the river? So he brings two reasons. Number one, Liskor Spus Akeda. Number one is we want to remember the Akeda. Just like in the davening, we read about it in the Kriyas HaTorah. So we want to remember the Akeda on Rosh Hashana. Why is that? So he explains the Isam in Medrash, because it explains in the Medrash, Halach Avram Avinu in Yitzchak B'nei Akeda, when Avram Avinu was on his way to do the Akeda, Asa HaSatan is Atzmai Kamay Nahar. The Satan made himself look like he was a river. Why did he do that? La'akvay, in order to stop Avram Avinu from going to the Akeda. So now how's Avram Avinu going to pass a river, yeah? V'avar Avram Avinu alav hashalom banar ad savare. And what happened was, Avram Avinu was not nisbal, and he went anyway straight into the river until the water got all the way up to his neck. And then Avram Avinu said, "Hoshiyeni Elikim, Hashem saved me. Kivo mayim ad nafesh." The water is reaching to my nefesh, which is his nose, his breathing. And then the water immediately receded. The Rebbe actually has a whole interesting sikha where he talks about this, and he says that the message over here is that everyone, very often we have challenges in life, and people think this is the biggest challenge ever, and there's no way I could overcome it. But he says, look, the whole thing was a mirage. It wasn't real. It was fake. This whole challenge is all from the Yetzer Hara. And not only, it's not even that it's from the Yetzer Hara, it's not even real. And if you stand up to the Yetzer Hara and you say, I'm doing what I need to do because this is what Hashem wants, then it goes away like it really is, which is nothing. So number one is we want to remember the river that Avram Avinu also dealt with on his way to the Akeda. And this way, we remind the Eibishter, if you will, of the schus of the Akeda. Number two, there's another reason why we go to the river, which is we're crowning Hashem as king. And what was the common way that this was done? They would go and they would anoint kings next to rivers. Why would they do that? As we'll see later, actually, in the Gemara Sukkah that we're learning, where it talks about the flow of a river. Basically, a river flows. It doesn't stop. So l'remez, and this is the insinuation when you bring a king there, would be shetimashich malchusav, that you want that his kingship should continue. So you do that. Now, here's an interesting thing. So those are two reasons so far. Yeah, number one, you go to the river because the Akeda. Number two, because you want to show the consistent flow in order, because that's what I said. The whole story was that the Satan turned himself into a river, and then in the end it was nothing. But the point is, we're showing the Eibishter that thing. So those are the two reasons so far. Now there's a third reason that's brought from the Alter Rebbe in the Siddur. The Alter Rebbe says, "Ubasiddur kasav Rabbeinu ki mayim moedim al chsadim." The Alter Rebbe writes another reason, which is that water shows on chesed. Excuse me. Hold this thought, and we'll come back to this. Okay. So far we have three reasons. Number one, because the Akeda, the Satan. Number two, because that's where they anoint kings. And number three is that water is chesed. And we'll come back to that. Now, it's also a good thing if it's outside the city. And that's because we don't do that with Poil. It will be very hard to go outside the city on Rosh Hashana like it used to be, maybe easier. But this is because part of the psukim that we say that kivo, what is it? Something chatoim, I forgot the lashon. No, something. I forgot the exact lashon, but basically, yom kol chatoim. Forgot the pasuk, but anyway, that has to do with the averes, and this is it has something to do with outside the city. So we like to go outside the city. So that's number one. Number one, it should be like we said, a river. I guess number 1.1 is that it should be outside the city if possible. And number 1.2 would be v'yesh b'ei dagim. It should also have fish. Why should there be fish? Or there should be fish. I shouldn't say it should have. There should be fish. Why? So number one, the zecher, in order for us to remember, we're similar to fish that are inside of a net. Yeah. Because we also on Rosh Hashana, we're in this net that's basically hovering between life and death and judgment, right? Or din. In other words, when someone goes fishing, all they need to do is lift up the net and the fish are out of water. So too, we're talking in water, we're still alive, and the Eibishter is giving us chayes, but we're being judged, and it's up to the Eibishter how it's going to go. So mitoich kach, and the reason why we do that is because naharer yoser b'tshuva. We want to awaken ourselves to tshuva more. So part of it has to do with us. Lav dafka is this what you'll see the Alter Rebbe says something different, but this is one reason. Number two, oitam, another reason, maybe this one we're more familiar with, which is that we want that there should be no ayin haras that can reach us on for the year. Just like fish. Fish don't have any ayin hara. They're covered over by the water. It's al pi Chassidus and Kabbalah, but there's no ayin hara that could affect them. And therefore we want that we should be able to multiply like fish as well. Fish have a lot of offsprings. So that's number two. Number three, v'yesh oitam is another reason why we want to see fish. Ki ladagim ein gevinim, because fish don't have eyelids. And therefore their eyes are always open. And the reason why we do that is to awaken the open eye of Hashem. So in other words, like this. If you look at what we have so far, and the Alter Rebbe says this in the Siddur when he writes the instructions right before, so he adds 2 points. He says mayim is chasadim, and fish is einab kucha. They have open eyes. Okay, so mayim is chased, and that is it. Now, why do we do that? The reason why do we care about that? Because on the first day of Rosh Hashana after Mincha, it's a shas hadin. Yeah, it's a we say dina kasha. It's a challenging time, meaning that we're hovering mamish at the time that Hashem is sort of making a decision, deliberating, as they say. So therefore, we want to go to water, which is chesed, in order that it should weaken this din, and we also want there to be fish that also have all the milas that we mentioned before that should have that same thing. Now, why does Alter Rebbe have to say that? Because there are people who say, and part of the reason, I guess, of Tashlich is that we figuratively throw our Averis. Yeah, we shake our clothing after to show that we're throwing our Averis. So some people, they used to sort of go with this, that, oh, we're throwing our Averis into the water. So what happens if you're throwing your Averis into the water is that people, you rely on that, it becomes like a thing. But it's not so simple. The early, the different Chassidim would say, this is really something for tzaddikim. You don't just throw your averis away. You have to do tshuva. You have to return to the Eibishter, whatever that means. But you can't just throw your averis away. So the Alter Rebbe here doesn't talk about that so much. His nekuda is, it's not about throwing away your averis. It's about being mamtik vudis. It's about taking away the severity of that time on Rosh Hashana and making it into a better, more opportune time for our mishpat that's happening then. So now, based on that, because of that, so ve'im ain't sham nar sheyish b'ei dagim. Let's say you don't have a river that has fish. So you're missing the second quality, maybe the first one also. So holchin l'nahar achar, you can go to a different river that doesn't have fish, or lebe'er, or even to a well. Okay. Now the interesting thing over here, as we said, is because, and this is what the Alter Rebbe in the Siddur, he doesn't say you go to a place with fish. In the Shulchan Aruch, he writes you go to a place that has fish. But in the Siddur, he just writes that you go to a nahar or a be'er. Now a well doesn't have fish. Yeah. A well is a little standalone thing that's going into the deep in the ground and pulling up water. There's no fish there. You're not going to pull out a whale or something, yeah, or a shark. So there's no fish there. So obviously we see that the Alter Rebbe sort of is not so makbid. You have to have the fish. It's just like we said before that the whole idea of the fish is because they have einab kicha, they have open eyes, and we want to remember that. Okay, so if there's no fish, then there's no fish. It's not like the biggest deal. We would prefer there should be there because it has all these things. But Papoyal, it's like we said before. It's only a remez. It's only sort of this hint of what's happening, that what we want to accomplish. So therefore, it doesn't have to actually be there. If you don't have, yeah, what we saying? The first two reasons we said was number one that they have no ayin hara. And number two was no, that was number two. Sorry, number one was that the fish are inside of a trap, right? Because we're talking about, and it can go either way. It's up to the. What's that? Let me just finish this thing over here. Now, what do you do while you're there? You say apsukim mi kel kamaycha. You say the special psukim like I mentioned. Kakasuv basidurim say the ratasha like it says. There's a lot of different nuschais of exactly how you do the whole tashlach thing, but obviously we'll follow the master that we have and what's over there with the hiratzin and everything that's there. Yeah. Then umenadim shuli abgadim, and then after that, when you finish, you shake your clothing. Now, if you look in the bottom, it says Yud Gimel, where he brings our minig, where it says when you finish the seder tashlich, you shake your talis kata, not just your bgadim. Other people they just shake their clothing to show that they're throwing off their averis. But we don't do that. We shake our tzitzis. Why do we shake our tzitzis? So I saw somewhere where it says, based on the shalah, that tzitzis is a specific type of beged that it says that it's a beged shchina. Quotes from the Arizal. It's a beged shchina. So I'm not sure why you're shaking that, but I guess it's not about throwing off your averis. I guess it's really about something about bringing the shchina, the chesed, and weakening the guru. Either way, the point is that you shake the tzitzis at the end. Now, why do we do that? V'hu l'remes ba'alma. The reason why we do that, he says, is another reason also, which is lite lay, that a person wants to give attention, or to throw away his chatoim, like we mentioned, and to also search through his own behaviors from now going forward. That his clothing, which means basically similar to how clothing get clean. So he wants to be clean from Avedis. Now, shaking clothing seemingly doesn't so much clean it, right? But when we get to the Hilchos of Shabbos, we'll talk about that it's not so simple. There are times that you're not even allowed to shake a clothing if it's dirty. It does exist. So there is an idea of shaking that would clean it. But we'll leave that for now. But here you see a few different reasons. Let's say it falls out on the first day, it falls out on Shabbos. So you go on the second day, which, as we said before, that is our minig, even though it's not so clear from the actual halacha that that's the way it has to be. Now, one thing interesting, there was a whole campaign, a bunch of times against Yidden doing tashlach in different public parks, and people would complain, very crunchy people, as they say, that they're coming with all the groups of people and they're feeding the fish. They were very bothered that the Yidden are feeding the fish. So little do they know that you're not allowed to feed fish unless you own the fish, right? So mezainis of elecha, which means that their mezainis is on you, so you have a responsibility to feed the animals. So you have to figure out how to do it. If not for that, you're not allowed to feed animals on Yom Tif. You're not allowed to feed a random animal. So we're actually not allowed to feed the fish, especially if it's Shabbos and you're going to carry even worse. But we're actually not allowed to. So in the end, I think they realized they were wrong, but maybe they weren't wrong. Maybe some kids came at some point and did throw in. Maybe they came not on Rosh Hashana, they came other times, whatever. But you're not allowed to feed the fish. Now, one interesting story about this is that basically what happens if you don't have a regular tashlich situation? You're on shlichus somewhere, you went somewhere. I remember one year I went to do prisons in Florida, in some random city. It was like in the middle of a city actually, but there was nowhere to do it. I think I only went for Yom Kippur, but they were there. Other people were there Rosh Hashana also. So you don't have water. What are you going to do that? I mean, Florida, you'd imagine you have water, right? Okay, but this was like in the middle of nowhere. So the point is that over there, so some would say that, okay, first of all, you could always do it a little bit later. You could continue doing it. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, people would go in middle of the Yud Gimel Midas Harachmin, they call it, which is the Yemei, which is the Aseres Yemei Tshuva. They would go in middle of the Aseres Yemei Tshuva. So you could technically do that. If you're away for Rosh Hashanah, you come back, and then you can go to a normal place. But what happened was there was a story with the Rebbe and J.J. Hack. That J.J. Hack then used to live in Brownsville, and he was in the early years. He was the rabbi in Brownsville, and then he would walk into Karnatz. Now I think the Rebbe told him once that he shouldn't come in; he should stay there. I forgot what it was because I think, if I'm not mistaken, they used to say Tilim and Shol. Maybe it was like a Tilim minyan. Like that's what most people do. Besides, if you're not doing Miftzayim. So I think he was the Rav, and he was supposed to be there, but he wanted to go to the Rebbe. Maybe it was the Farbring and Tashlach, whatever it was. So the Rebbe told him he should stay. And he said, well, I don't have water. What should I do? So the Rebbe told him, turn on a sink. So I don't know what that means, if he actually did or whatever. I'm not sure how to translate it. But there is an Indian that some people, when they taka, don't have water, or there's some big rabbanim in Eretz Yisrael when they were too old to travel easily, so they would go on top of their building and they would just look out and look at the water, and they would do it from there. So you have certain leniencies, but the story with him was that was the year that it was raining, plucking very hard, and the Rebbe ended up jumping over by botanical gardens to go do the tashra. So it was in the early years. So later on, so he probably felt bad, but later on, when the Rebbe saw him, he told him, "You should know I thought about you," which is a big thing. So he says, so he didn't say why. And no one knows, but there's two shittas in the family. I spoke to someone from the family, and he said there's two ways they translate. One way is that they say that J.J. Heft used to love these things. He lived for it, for the excitement, for jumping over a gate. This was like, his biggest mitzvah, his biggest joy on Rosh Hashanah would have been that it was raining and we went and we climbed over and it was amazing. So that's one way that they say it, that it was like a J.J. style story. And the other way they try to say it is that the Rebbe was saying that if JJ was there, he was like a bar poil, he would get things done. If JJ was there, they would have made sure to have the gate open and it wouldn't have been locked because of the rain. So you have two ways of viewing it. But either way, generally, again, you shouldn't have to fall into this issue because even if you don't have water there, so first of all, lav dafka do you need fish. If you don't have it, it's okay. Lav dafka doesn't have to be a running river. It could be a well, which some people in Crown Heights, besides the one by 770, later on they also dug one, I think, by Maple, there's a Maple Street Show, I think Maple Show is called. So they also, and then probably a few other places also. And then, and worst comes to worst, if your mom are desperate, apparently you could even turn on the running water if you really needed to, I think. But I will leave that. Usually that shouldn't be an issue. Any question or? Okay, good. So let's see if we can finish this today. The rest of it should be relatively easy. After you come back to shul and you daven mincha, but it's not yet the time for ma'ariv, and you have to wait for ma'ariv because you can't take out the first day early. So it's not like when he comes back. So if that's what you're asking, so you have to. So you can't daven ma'ariv early. So you're in shul and you have time to kill, so to say. So here, don't kill the time. Use the time. Meaning, yizar mechavres mereim. He says over here, you should be careful that you don't end up coming into this social circle. Because that's going to lead chas v'shalom to dvarim metelim. So what should you do? Achyasik b'teira. You should learn Torah. Or say tilim, or b'sifrei musar, or chassidus. Ki kadosh yom ladinin, because the whole day is supposed to be a special day for Hashem. Let me just read the bottom over here where it says Yudalit. Over here we have like this. B'shnei yom shel Rosh Hashanah, on the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, misha achas koidim tfilas amincha shel erev Rosh Hashanah. As we said in the beginning, even a half hour before Rosh Hashanah even starts, ad tfilas arves b'moitzei Rosh Hashanah, until the end of the second day. Yeshulishkoid b'amiras tilim laila v'yom. You should try to say as much tilim as possible that you can. And you should be careful from saying mundane speech ad katzei ha'achanin to the extreme. You should really try not to. L'mayit b'sheina, you should try to sleep as little as you need. Well, the harbis b'tfila, to do a lot extra tfila usachanunim and davening to the Eibishter mikadev v'leiv amik, from the depth of your hearts. At every available moment, you should say Tehillim. And then he says, Gam elu she'ema ashnim reichenin, even those that smoke. Kol Hashana, the whole year they're doing it. Maybe they shouldn't, but if they do the whole year, and usually on Yom Tov they would smoke also, because for them it's something like a oichel nefesh. But hine b'reish Hashana nimnoim bezeh. When it comes to Reish Hashana, they should refrain from doing that. So this is the chassidut, even though now it's not common to smoke, Baruch Hashem. But back in the day when it was more common, before they understood the severity of the damage that it does. So then the minute was on Rosh Hashanah they shouldn't, even though they usually would. About this, one Nakuda, I remember my Zaidi, he was a chassid, from his time in Russia. So he would have a friend who would come to visit him from Eretz Yisrael, and his friend would come, and he would, I don't think he stayed by him, but he would come to eat one of the meals by him. But both of them were, Tmimim from Amal. So they didn't talk extra on Rosh Hashanah. So here you have two buddies, one's from Eretz Yisrael, one's here. They never saw each other during the year. They didn't call each other because that's not how old Russians do things. They don't call each other. So the one time they see each other and they wouldn't talk to each other. It was quiet the whole meal. They wouldn't say a word to each other because you don't talk on Rosh Hashanah. So it's definitely an Indian not that long ago that people would try to be makbid to not talk or talk as little as possible. It could be they saw each other before or after. That could be. But this I happened to see myself by the meal, that they would sit there and they wouldn't say a word to each other. Yeah. So that's what he said. You try to speak as little as you can in order not to get into the problem of dvarim b'telim and things like that. Yes. So, but because one thing leads to the next, so therefore, chassidim at a minute, they would try not to talk at all, besides what was necessary, and just say till. That was the way they would do. Okay. You had a question?
Where do you live here?
Oh, I don't know. I don't live here. Okay, Chav Gimel. Shnei Yamim Tovim Shel. Let's finish this, and then we'll be able to have a little break, and then we'll be able to go to Chazor. So Shnei Yamim Tovim Shel Rosh Hashanah. The 2 days of Rosh Hashanah are different than every other Yom Tov. Why are they different than every other Yom Tov? Ki Yoim Echad Orech Hein Chashuvim. They are called. They're like one long day. We call it we call it Yamim Arichta. I think Yamim Arichta. We call it like it's one long day. Think about it. A regular Yom Tov, a regular Rosh Chodesh. If you have a 2-day Rosh Chodesh, yeah, what is it? What are the 2 dates? Lamed and Aleph. Rosh Hashanah is 2 days. What are the 2 days? Aleph and days. So it's not exactly the same. It's not the same thing that we have a suffix of which day is Rosh Hashanah. We know which day is Rosh Hashanah. So why do we celebrate 2 days? Fine, they have the reason. But the point is that it has a different category than other things, and it's called the Yom Arichta. It's called one long day. And therefore, ukdusha achasein. And therefore, technically, it's one continuation of kedusha. So what's the problem? So v'lachein nechelku ha'paiskim. So now we have a problem, and the paiskim they have disagreements. Im levarich bilal sheni bekiddush. Do you make a bracha on the second night of kiddush? Excuse me. V'chein ba'adlakas hanedes. And also when you light the candles the second night, and also when you blow the shofar the second day, do you say shachayanu? Because Shachayanu, the whole idea is that it's a new thing. You never came to this time. Your average Yom Tif, when you have a suffix, which day is which, so you say Shachayanu because what if today's really the first day and yesterday wasn't the mitzvah? So fine. Here, what are you saying Shachayanu? If it's one long day, and yesterday for sure was Rosh Hashanah, not today, it's just the Yom Arichta, so why are you doing Shachayanu again if you did already? It's one Kedusha. So why would you say not? Because some people say keeping the kedusha achasem because it's one extended kedusha. Ukvar beida shechiyanu berishan. You already said shechiyanu yesterday, and so you don't have to do it again. So again. So therefore, because of this issue, the minig is should be kiddush leil sheni when it comes to Friday, the second night, and you're making kiddush. Manichin ala shulchan pri chadash. You put a new fruit on the table. And this way, when you make shechiyanu, you have in mind the fruit. Yeah, so you don't make a second shechiyanu once on kiddush and once on the fruit. You make shechiyanu on kiddush, and you have in mind that it should apply to the fruit. Or you put on a new clothing. And therefore, if you do that, then when you make your B'rei Priya Eitz, then you include the shechiyanu on that new fruit. But what does that tell you, by the way? When should you eat that new fruit? Right after Kiddush. Because the whole point is you want the Shechiyanu to go on that fruit. In the beginning, we were talking about dipping the apple in honey, so it has to be part of your meal. And we wanted that you should say the hiratz, and that should be next to the bracha of the what's it called? You want the hiratz to be next to the bracha of the fruit, but you have to do it in the middle of your meal. You can't do it before. You run into all these issues of the bracha rishena, bracha achreina. So forget all that. But here, you have to do it before the Suda, because the whole point while you're eating it is because you want to have a Shechiyanu. So you need to be able to eat that fruit right away. So because of that, so look in the bottom, Tezvav, he says like this, when you want to eat the fruit on the second night, you do it you do it before you wash your hands. And therefore, because you're doing it before the meal, you have to deal with all of the brachas. So nagu lecho kashir, you have to eat the shir of how much is required for a bracha. And to make a bracha achreina, also when you're finished, before you eat your meal, and then you're going to have to do the benching. So in other words, your benching is not going to satisfy your obligation for the bracha achreina because you're eating it before the suda. So you have to eat the right share, and you have to make the bracha achreina pri lifnei netilas yadayim. And then you're able to do the netilas, and then you're able to then go after you make your bracha achreina, you go and you wash and you do everything else that you need to do. So it's a little bit of an interesting seder that than you would imagine. And this is the Rebbe actually asked the Frierdiker Rebbe about this, like we mentioned, and the Frierdiker Rebbe said, yes, this is what should be done. So that's the way that we do this. Let's continue over here. Okay, now what happens if you don't have a new fruit or you don't have a new clothing? So what do you do now? So the halacha is it's okay. You'll say shechayanu anyways. What do you mean? We just explained that you have this whole issue. So he says, because we paskin that really you do say shechayanu on the second day. So because there are those that say that you don't, and it's a very strong opinion, so therefore we have a whole shtick that you take a shechayanu. But if you don't have that shechayanu, you do it anyways, right? The biggest proof, I guess you could say, is that women, here I'll say right now. Now, the same thing would be when it comes to lighting candles on the second night. that if they already said Shechianu the first night, so what do you do now? So he explains that if their minig is they say Shechianu on the second night, which is our minig. Azaya call upon him, so then they should do like this, right? Because they already said Shechianu last night. So if possible, Tilbush beged chadash or yitaniach pri chadash. Number one, they should just wear a new clothing, or they should put the new fruit in front of them also so that they can see it. So if it's on the table and they're lighting there, that can work. And the reason they would do that is like we said before, the shechianu has to apply to that also. However, just like by kiddishim, what if they don't have a new baguette or a new fruit? And it's okay. And the same thing for the third issue, which was the shofar. For that one too, if possible, they should try to wear new clothing. Now, what happens if the first day Shabbos you didn't actually blow shofar? So then then that guy, the Baal Tekeah, doesn't have to put on a new clothing because you never said shechianu on the shofar yet. So therefore, it wouldn't be an issue. Now, okay, that we explained over there. But one more thing like this, so before we end over here. So one more thing is like this: that basically the Rebbe brings, and the Frierdiker Rebbe brought many times, that every single Rosh Hashanah you should be makabel on yourself a new hidur. That means, as we know, every living thing has to grow. The Rebbe used to say that expression often, and people also, you need to grow also, which means that you have to be able to consistently move forward. And one of the ways to do that is to, on frequent occasions or on occasions soon enough, to add in something. So very often, maybe you guys don't realize it because you're younger. When a person gets older, they stagnate, which means that there's not much change in their life. They're doing the same thing over and over. They fall into a pattern, and everyone's happy. Yeah. But over here, what the Frierdiker Rebbe says is every single Rosh Hashanah, you should do something new. You should do something new to make sure that you're still growing. So take a new hidur. Yeah, and it could be anything. I had a Maggid Shir once in Bernois, so very Siddish guy, and he once took a achlata that in the Shema of Karbanis he's going to have more kavanah. So because he must have been reading it as part of the Siddur, and he says, no, I'm going to stop and do the whole thing and have kavanah. So that's someone on that that's shaykh to that. But I'm sure we could all find things, even smaller things that could use a good boost. And this is a good time that you should take on a new thing to be able to make sure that you have everything you need for the next year. Okay, so this was Siman Kuf Chaf Tes about Rosh Hashanah, and next time we'll move on to the next Siman about Aseret Shemei Tshuva.